Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And this weekend was a bit mad, but we are going to focus just on one topic for this video, because the French riots are a mess I don't want to get into at the moment, because I don't have time, and I think it will actually just depress me about the state of affairs of the world too much. So today we are going to be focusing on one of my favourite British politicians, Nigel Farage. And it appears a tactic that has been affecting alternative media types has finally made it to the mainstream, and that is bank account closures, for very nefarious reasons. The most high profile case that I can think of off the top of my head was from Patriotic Alternative's Laura Towler, who randomly started seeing her card was being declined at cash points and when trying to buy things. So she went to her nearest branch of Santander, and there the counter assistant seemed just as mystified. After about an hour of waiting, though, Laura was called through to the manager's office. "I'm going to read a statement out for you," the manager said, "but I'm not going to be able to answer any of your questions after that." He read out, "We have locked your bank account. We can't give you any more information. We might be in touch in the future with more information, but we don't know when that might be." And so after a month of having to sort out all her bills and her direct debits that had obviously been cancelled, and while struggling to actually access the money that was hers at Santander, she received a letter saying, "Under the terms and conditions, we can withdraw banking facilities at any time, and in line with company policy, we don't give further details." And enclosed with that letter was a cheque for all the money that Santander didn't allow her to touch for a month. But this is the power that banks have over us. They could literally just close your account at any time for any reason that they see fit. And obviously no one was panicking about this because Laura Towler is a spokeswoman for Patriotic Alternative, and no one wants to touch that with a 10-foot barge pole, quite understandably, given some things that have come out about Patriotic Alternative. For any Patriotic Alternative fans watching this, no, I am not talking about that stupid Channel 4 show. That was an embarrassment, although there were some things said in that you would not want to get out if you were a serious political party. I'm more talking about Mark Collette, who seems to be a human gun shooting his own foot over and over. But anyway, we're here to talk about Farage, because he is much, much, much more high profile and is much, much, much more palatable to most of the UK. But I will let him explain what happened.
Hello there. Now, you would think, in the light of this, that I'd be pretty happy. I mean, News Presenter of the Year, the Trick Awards was pretty cool. But actually, truth is, I'm not full of the joys of spring. I've been living with something for the last couple of months that may well fundamentally affect my future career going on from here, and whether I can even stay living in this country.
There is just absolutely nobody that should have that much sway over you, over whether you can stay in your own home country or not. Absolutely nobody should be able to ostracise you out of your own country that you are a citizen of, or in the case of the UK, a subject of the Crown. And yet, spoiler alert, that's exactly what's happened to Farage. Anyway, Farage goes on to explain that he has had both his personal and business accounts with a big name bank, which he is not naming yet, as he is probably giving the bank time to rectify this mistake. And yet he goes on to say this.
I got a phone call a couple of months ago to say, "We are closing your accounts." I asked why. No reason was given. I was told a letter would come which would explain everything. The letter came through and simply said, "We are closing your accounts. We want to finish it all by a date, which is around about now."
Quite literally, this is the same situation that Laura Towler was in, and obviously neither of these people deserve to be treated like this, no matter their views. And I mean, I find Nigel Farage's views very, very agreeable, and I do genuinely believe it's just been a massive media campaign against him that has ended up with people hating him. I don't think they could really tell you what his specific positions on things are. I don't think many could tell you that he is actually for legalisation of drugs and things like that. I think all people really know about him is that he really does not like the EU and he wants less immigration, both of which are, as we saw from the referendum, popular opinions. But with Patriotic Alternative, obviously it's far less agreeable, hence, as I say, nobody touched it with a 10-foot barge pole. It didn't make headline news, and yet here we are now, it is now making headline news. This was always going to be inevitable. Because as I say, we're in the cloud decade, no one pays attention to any mistakes that we are making, and these things are only going to get worse. I don't think Farage will get his account back, I'm afraid.
I didn't quite know what to make of it. I complained. I emailed the chairman, a lackey phoned me to say that it was a commercial decision, which I have to say, I don't believe for a single moment.
And I have to say, I do agree with Farage here, because this video was from about 4 days ago, and at this point, people still have no idea which bank Nigel Farage was a customer of. So if it was a commercial decision, i.e., a decision to improve the company's brand, then it's not worked, because absolutely nobody knows who this bank is. And as far as I'm aware up to this point, Farage still hasn't said who the bank is, and the bank haven't announced that they've kicked out Farage. So how is this a commercial decision?
So I thought, well, there we are. I'll have to go and find a different bank. I've been to 7 banks, actually. Asked them all, could I have a personal and a business account? And the answer has been no in every single case.
Crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And it is absolutely no wonder to me that Farage thinks that he can't stay in the country. Because, much like Laura Towler, I assume he's having trouble actually getting his hands on his own money here. Though he has recently tweeted that he is on holiday, I can only assume that he is getting his spending money from his wife. But the fact of the matter is that we are seeing a major political actor being completely ostracised by banks who you would assume are not political actors, but if there is no good reason for punishing Farage in this way, you can only assume that it's for political reasons.
So why is this happening to me? Well, one explanation is this. A few years ago, the European Union came up with a definition of somebody called a PEP, a politically exposed person. Now, this could range from anybody from a prime minister down to a local councillor. And I think the reason for it was, were people in politics open to bribery? Could foreign governments from Ukraine or China or wherever else it may be, could they be pumping money into the accounts of corrupt politicians? So I kind of understand that and get that.
Even when this is a negative for Nigel Farage, he turns it into a positive for kind of his own brand and his own political ends, which in a sense you have to admire even if you don't like the guy. He's flipped this whole conversation around to the only thing I can think of this being is the fault of the EU as an anti-corruption thing that has ended up being used against the EU's enemies. That is essentially what he's saying here. And is it true or not? Well, to be honest, I have absolutely no idea. But I have absolutely no alternatives other than this is a political attack that I can think of. So this is one of those stories that I would say definitely wait for more information to come out before you make any assumptions here, but as I say, without any reasonable alternatives for people to come up with, or without the bank making any public statements about this, and we don't know which bank it is yet, it's hard to come to any other reasonable assumption here.
But it's all about interpretation, isn't it? And what the banks argue is that to maintain an account for a politically exposed person gives them increased costs of compliance. Now, I have spoken to the city minister in this country, and there is some hope that this EU definition, which came into British law, may be moderated in some way. We'll have to see.
And again, this is still pushing on the attack, because this is to push saying, oh, we need to get rid of all EU laws that have been written into the UK laws, which the EU law bonfire is something that Sunak has promised, and I think even Boris Johnson has promised, and we are yet to see come to fruition. I believe the Select Committee is still going through each law, trying to decide which ones they should keep and get away from. But unfortunately, with every cabinet reshuffle, that process seems to get reset. It's Kenny Badenoch going through it at the moment, and last I saw, she was having an argument with a pro-Brexiteer at the Select Committee, basically saying, I'm new to this, I don't really know what's going on yet, I have not made any changes yet. Let's go through it and see if there are any laws that we actually may need, because the EU wasn't all bad. They did make some good laws, believe it or not, but an awful lot of useless ones.
But of course, any bank, any organisation can choose to interpret a PEP and whether they want the account in any way they choose. To my knowledge, I don't think anybody has been treated like me in the world of politics.
Not quite true, Farage. I know you probably haven't heard of her, but Laura Towler, as I said before, has absolutely been treated like this before. It's just never gone mainstream like this before because, well, the banks were quite careful with who their targets were at first, I suppose. And naturally, as I said before, this is completely unjust. I don't think the banks should have the power to pick and choose which political people they can do business with. Now, if these people had been proven to have taken money from Russia for their political campaigns or their parties or whatever it is, and they broke laws, that would be fair enough. Farage has done nothing like that.
A few months ago, in the House of Commons, Sir Chris Bryant, chairman of the Privileges Committee, said, using parliamentary privilege, that I had received large sums of money directly from the Russian government, and he named a calendar year in which it had happened. Truth is, I didn't receive a penny from any source with even any link to Russia.
Yes, and thankfully the Spectator did a bit of fact-checking on this, because the claim from Chris Bryant was that he had received £548,000 from Russia Today in 2018. And so here are the facts. The base for the claim seems to be Farage's declaration of outside earnings when he was an MEP in the European Parliament figure. Company accounts for his media vehicle, Thorn in the Side Limited, show that its assets exceed 548,000 for the year to May 2018, compared with about 157,000 in the previous year. But this figure was his total sum for all media appearances at a time when Farage had never been in more demand. Which makes sense. He had just won a referendum, and the blob were refusing to enact said referendum. It included a very lucrative contract with LBC, for whom he was then hosting a radio programme 5 days a week, and Fox News, where he appeared as a regular talking head, and with whom he had signed up as an analyst shortly after the EU referendum. Any fees from Russia Today would have been a small part of the overall total sum, with Farage appearing infrequently on the broadcaster in the months after the Brexit vote in June 2016. A quick search by Mr. S, which is Stirpike, the pseudonym for the research department at The Spectator, suggests that Farage's last appearance was on RT was 3 March 2017, the infamous show where a child dressed as a queen pretended to knight him. Oh god, I remember that. After that, he does not seem to have appeared on the channel at all. Farage himself says that in 2016 and 2017, I had 2 small appearance fees, back then well under 5,000, not appeared since. So if it does appear that the bank has caused Nigel Farage to lose access to his bank account, my god, does he have an excellent case to take Chris Bryant to court for libel. Or at least he would if Chris Bryant wasn't under parliamentary privilege at the time. That basically means that members of parliament can say whatever the hell they like with the knowledge that the courts cannot touch them. So even though Chris Bryant has just full-on lied about Nigel Farage and his income, and this has negatively affected Nigel Farage and possibly cost him a free life in this country, courts can't do anything about it. And you just have to hope that the Parliamentary Privileges Committee act on it and are quite frankly much harsher against Chris Bryant than they have been against Boris Johnson, who has been in the middle of a stitch-up.
And yet, because he said it, it stands. I wrote to the Speaker, I demanded an apology. Nothing has been forthcoming from Sir Chris Bryant. Well, I wonder whether that is what's given me part of the problem.
If that is part of the problem, then, to be quite frank, the whole of the parliamentary system needs a shake-up, because clearly it is not fit for purpose if it is able to ostracise its own people it's supposed to be representing out of the country, and just being used to fully destroy their political enemies. That is not how Parliament should be acting.
I have employed a top firm of London lawyers. I'm going through a series of subject access requests to find out what is held on me by the international agencies and by the bank that wants to close me down.
And that's the unfortunate thing with Laura Towler. She couldn't afford any of that. Or she just had to lay down and take it and move to a different bank or move to the post office, because by law, post office has to let you have a bank account. They can't make any decisions like this. And yet, if a cartel of international banks are refusing to allow Farage's custom, I mean, what can you do about it? You are going to have to get Parliament and laws in place to sort that type of thing out, because that is quite frankly just not acceptable. And you cannot have a civilised society where high-profile politicians, who quite clearly represent a sizable amount of people in the country, are being ostracised out of the country.
But think about it. Without a bank account, you effectively become a non-person. You don't actually exist. It's like the worst regimes of the mid-20th century, be they in Russia or Germany. You literally become a non-person. And you don't anymore, you did in the past, but you don't anymore actually have a right to be entitled to a bank account.
I think it is technically true that you It's not enshrined in law that you have a right to a bank account. However, as mentioned before, with the post office, I believe, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong there, I believe they have to give you a bank account because you actually can't get any sort of payment without a bank account. But obviously, with private banks, they obviously have the right to refuse your business, as any business does, which is another reason why I'm very angry that they all got bailed out in 2008. But, I mean, here we are, and they're probably going to get bailed out again in the next financial crash coming to the end of the clown decade.
Now, there is a possibility through a fintech company that I could find some means of receiving and paying money, which could be a little bit of a lifeline, but it's not a bank account because I won't be able to earn any interest on positive cash balances. I won't be able to borrow money if I need to at any point or take out a mortgage, should I so desire. Now, that will be completely denied to me.
It is absolutely crazy when you hear things like that. Nigel Farage cannot do what pretty much every other British person can do with their money because the banks say so. That is actually quite mad. And I seriously don't know a solution to this problem other than getting Parliament involved and punishing the banks in some way for doing this to him. But I can't imagine they'll do it, especially under Labour. Labour will probably be all for it and probably reward the banks with bailouts when they ruin the economy.
I won't be able to have a debit card linked directly to my account. I won't really be able to exist and function in a modern 21st century Britain.
And I have to say, I cannot disagree with any of that. How is he supposed to live if he can't even get a debit card and live in this cashless society that we have slowly become? Because I am seeing more and more companies, even small food trucks that used to only take cash, they are now going card only. You're seeing more and more of that, and if he can't even have a debit card, he literally can't pay for anything. So if that's going to be the case, it's going to have to be a bit like cash. If you've got the cash, you can't be refused. Well, maybe then there needs to be legislation to say if someone applies for a debit card and they put money in your bank, you have to give them at least that. Anyway, he mentions he's going to explain more on GB News, so I'm going to handpick the extra knowledge we get on GB News. He mainly just says the same story that we have just heard from that Twitter video, and also mentions that there were other people who have had their bank accounts randomly closed down for seemingly no reason, but none quite as large scale as Nigel Farage. And these were other politicians and other people in the media, but he mentions that it's all one way. And nobody should be surprised that it's all one way. In fact, there was another news story today about a Brexiteer and gender-critical vicar who had his bank accounts pulled. Yorkshire Building Society customers' account was closed days after writing to the bank to complain about its messaging during Pride Month. I wonder if this vicar who is against Pride is somewhat conservative. Well, the Reverend Richard Fothergill, a customer of Yorkshire Building Society for 17 years, had his account closed yesterday after writing to the bank to complain about its public messaging during Pride Month. I wrote to them on their feedback portal making 2 points. One was, is it really a good use of your time? You're not here for social engineering. And secondly said, I have serious ethical problems with the transsexual element and the implications of broadcasting that to young children. In a letter he received last week, he said he was told his relationship with YBS had irrevocably broken down and that the company holds a zero-tolerance approach to discrimination. They didn't justify it. They said, your comments will not stand. I think it's fairly sinister, and we're in a very dangerous waters when banks can pick and choose who they're going to do business with based on prejudicial whims. Exact same problem as Farage. And this caused such bad press for YBS that they came out on Twitter and said, we never close saving accounts based on different opinions about beliefs or feedback from customers. We only ever close an account if a customer is rude, abusive, violent, or discriminates in any way based on specific facts, comments, and behaviour in each case. Which, obviously, given that we have seen absolutely everything that goes on in media and with the blob and with leftists, we all know that saying anything bad about transgenderism, transsexualism, or anything against the LGBTQ plus alphabetti spaghetti community, that is discrimination. That is why he had his account closed down. There is no question about that. It's happening to more and more people, and it could happen to you if your bank finds your Twitter account. So I was thinking of not going anonymous at some point in the future. I don't think I'm going to while I have so much at stake in my bank account. Anyway, Farage had some extra information to add on to the GB News segment. So this is what he says after he said for the day he was pondering what his options were, after posting his video to Twitter.
Well, you could knock me down with a feather, because the phone rang at 7:15, and it was the bank that wants to close me down completely in a few weeks' time. They claim there's nothing political at all in what they're doing. It's purely a commercial decision.
Again, he mentioned that before, but I don't see what the commercial advantage is by stopping Farage having a bank account. Because no one knows what this bank is, so if you get a load of people celebrating Farage's depersoning, then they don't know which bank they can bring their business to. So how is this a commercial decision?
And it was said to me on the phone a few minutes ago, they could get me a personal account with another bank that is part of the same group, but that doesn't apply to the business account, so frankly, isn't of much use to me.
We know we've just closed down your business and personal account, but, why don't you go somewhere else in the conglomerate and we can sort at least part of that issue out? Keep bringing us your business, please. Yeah, I mean, even if he could do that for both, I don't think I'd bother if I was Farage. I mean, 40 years of business with the same bank and this is how they treat you? I mean, that has got to be devastating. I wouldn't be happy with that, obviously. Anyway, that's all the extra information, and obviously with all these stories coming out of banks closing down accounts for political reasons because we can't find any other reasonable excuse for the bank to close down these accounts, the government said this: banks must not close accounts for political reasons, says Minister. Culture Secretary calls for regulators to take action after Nigel Farage claimed his account had been shut down over his views on the EU. So Farage's controversy followed similar controversies about PayPal blocking payment systems used by the Free Speech Union, and a vicar who said he was dropped by his building society for questioning its stance on LGBTQ+ issues. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, is said to be deeply concerned about the politicisation of banking decisions and is planning to set out measures to strengthen protections for customers. Fingers crossed for that. A Treasury source said the Daily Telegraph, "No one should have their bank account denied on the grounds of freedom of expression. We expect to take action on this issue within weeks." This morning, Fraser, the Culture Secretary, told LBC, "I agree with Jeremy on that. It's important that people are able to get facilities." She said she was quite concerned that people's bank accounts might be closed for the wrong reasons, and I do think that it is something that should be thinking about very carefully. Asked about how banks should be stopped from cutting off customers for political reasons, Fraser said, "The banks are obviously regulated, and those are the sorts of things that regulators might want to consider." So that's all well and good, or is this going to be one of those things that the Tories say that they are going to do, put in some laws or regulations that are then just blocked down at absolutely every turn? This seems like regulation that would be harder to block than, say, the illegal immigration bill, because for some reason pretty much everyone in the political class seems to want as many illegal immigrants in the country as possible. But direct attacks on political opponents like this, I think that is quite hard to put forward as this is actually good for you in the country. You'd think that about illegal immigrants as well, but people seem to think that just because people are getting on a boat and crossing a channel, that means that living in Albania is much more dangerous than that, which doesn't follow at all. However, whether the government manages to get legislation in on that or not, I don't think is going to make a difference, because people of any gender can be pregnant, Bank of England states. Central Bank also offers to help staff to pay for gender reassignment treatment using private medical insurance. So trans people working at the Bank of England are subsidised by the Bank of England to have a sex change in the private sector, which is incredibly expensive in the UK. The Bank of England's view and actions were included in its 2022 submission to be included in a list of 100 top employers published by Stonewall, the LGBT lobby group, a copy of which has been obtained by the Times. Why is the Bank of England trying to get on Stonewall's top 100 employers? That should be a mark of embarrassment. The bank came 57th in Stonewall's annual list last year after submitting a 103-page application. 103 pages just to say, yeah, we're okay with the gays. Are you for real? This revealed that in June 2021, the bank had introduced a family leave policy that included the phrase birthing parent to mean mother. Ugh. The bank's parental bereavement leave policy talks about parents without specifying gender, its application said. It emphasised that the term meant a parent who is or was pregnant with the child, but included persons of any and all gender identities. It also detailed the bank's commitment to gender-neutral lavatories, stating that it planned to upgrade its facilities. It included a commitment to ensure that the 7th floor of its headquarters in London only offered unisex lavatories. And then obviously we've had quite a few stories come out recently of women being sexually assaulted in lavatories, especially in schools. My lord, it goes on. Each bank employee, of whom there are 4,000 in the UK, was expected to have a diversity and inclusion objective for each calendar year, and all would be assessed on it, the submission stated. What a waste of people's time. Staff at the bank, which had faced criticism for raising interest rates while failing to tame inflation, a much more important issue, are encouraged to include their pronouns in email signatures. I absolutely hate that trend in corporations, and I'm glad I am out of the corporate world because of that. Meanwhile, senior staff encourage others to be allies to the LGBT community by wearing a rainbow lanyard and displaying the same symbol at their workstation. The bank's private medical insurance covers treatments for pelvic surgeries needed to treat gender dysphoria, or the mismatch of a person feels between their biological sex and their gender identity. The healthcare provided by AXA Health could also cover phalloplasty, vaginoplasty, and clitoroplasty, the application said. That is the surgery to get a penis, get a vagina, or get a clitoris. I say get them. Make pseudo ones. That seem to be the main reason people regret transitioning. I mean, just to go on a bit of a tangent, I am asked sometimes why I care so much about transgender or these gay issues or just the whole LGBT thing in general. This is part of the reason why, and there's going to be a bigger reason that comes back round to the subject at hand, but this is part of the reason why. Entire government institutions and our tax money, and by the way, people who ask me why I care about this, I know you don't agree with any of this either, but our tax money is going towards this and is even paying for the private medical insurance that is going towards allowing people to get their transition in the private sector. And by the way, as I keep pointing out since I found it out, most trans people don't even get these surgeries. All they will do is take hormones. That is the only way they will be trans. And yet the Bank of England is happy to basically put them on a fast track using the public purse to get them all these surgeries that they don't even necessarily want. And then the Bank of England is saying we have to show all these rainbow colours all over the office to show that we are on board with this type of nonsense. And guess what? If they are that desperate to get on Stonewall's good side, they are absolutely going to fight the government much more than they already have been if the government are going to say, I don't know, ban trans kids from getting hormones or basically just do anything that Stonewall says is bad. They are completely allied with this third-party organisation against the government because they are supposed to be completely independent of the government. It appears to have just been a complete disaster when it comes to the central bank. But to bring this back round, this is the type of thing that private banks as well are using as their excuse to stop people running their lives normally. All because some people don't think that you are able to... Well, a lot of people don't even think gender's a thing. They think it's just another word for sex, which it is, or at least was. But nowadays you have this massive loud minority that is in the ear of the central bank apparently and a lot of other government institutions that is dictating a completely unrelated dogma to economics and really should be completely out of the reach of government, but they've infiltrated it, looks like, and so our whole lives now have to revolve around it apparently, especially for the past month. So that's why I've got a big problem with it. Absolutely everything has become political, and if you are on the wrong side of any high-profile political battleground, your life is, quite frankly, at risk. Your ability to have liberty is completely at risk, and a lot of people don't seem to care. That's obviously a massive problem. It's a problem that's only going to get worse before it gets better. Anyway, it's Monday, so I thought you could all do with a black pill. Anyway, that is everything I had for you today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.